Yeah, hello, 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 and happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. And welcome into the Culture Club, guys. I am Robinette Cross. Those of you who are in this club know me, and you know that I'm the founder of Cross Cultural Talks. LLC. One of the things that we love to do is we promote academic success and cross-cultural understanding. And under that umbrella, it's a lot of different things that we do. But today, I focus on Sundays on learning about culture, taking deeper dives into it. So this is a summer series. Hopefully, it'll spill over into something that lasts longer. But certainly, while I have the time, then this will be a sustained series all summer long for Culture Club. And while we'll focus on cultures across the world eventually, then our primary area, our continent of focus is Africa. Okay. Our continent of focus is Africa. And today we are going to look at different masks and festivals. So if you are in the Virginia area, then a couple of years ago, you should have seen at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts that there was a traveling exhibit that was there for a couple of months on the masks of Congo. And we know by our knowledge of the African diaspora, or even if you've seen, for example, The Lion King, the Broadway production, you know that masks carry so many different meanings. They're celebratory, they're protective, there are specific times and places and celebrations or events where masks can and should be worn. So we're going to talk about a few of them today, and we're going to even see some examples of them, okay? All right. If you're joining in, welcome, welcome. I'm doing my best to make sure I keep up with you all on Facebook as well. And so, hello, hello. Oh, my cousin Irma. Hi, pretty girl. It is so good to see you. Hi, cousin Irma Jean. You are wonderful, and I love you. So here's hoping I can do both. I'm gonna try my best. Okay. So a couple of things that I wanted to think about first is if you could wear a mask, right? We know what masks are. If you could wear a mask, then that represents your inner strength, like you're a superhero or something that's important to you, what would it look like? Take a minute and think about it. What would that mask look like? Would you take a more Western approach and have it look like, a Marvel character, or is it a DC? I know they're rivals. I don't know, right? Would it be something from a show you've seen? Would it be something that you make up on your own? Hi, Katrina. Love you, love you. Welcome in. We are talking about African masks and festivals today. So if you had to create one that reminded you of yourself and your inner strength, what would that mask look like? And I remember as a child, I often wanted to look like Storm because I said, oh my gosh, she's so pretty, but she's also so very strong. But that's also before I got into this idea of understanding masks and cultures and what they could be used for. So masks aren't always about disguising yourself, hiding yourself, covering yourself. They are true to your identity. They're about identity and storytelling and spiritual transformation. So when people put them on, especially in African cultures, because that's our focus today, when they put them on, it's like they're adopting or adorning a whole different part of themselves, or even invoking a different spirit, which is very common in several African cultures, the invocation of spirits. So today we're going to journey into a world where art meets spirit and traditional celebrations that have shaped cultures for centuries. So come on and journey with me. Let's see if we can get it going. When we're thinking about why African masks matter, in many African cultures, that's especially across West, Central, and Southern Africa, and into really kind of Northeast Africa, not Northern Africa, but the northern portion of East Africa. Okay. When you're thinking about that, especially Sub-Saharan African countries and regions, not just countries, but across the regions, then they're sacred objects. They're not just for show, they're not just for beauty. They are sacred objects that are used in festivals. They're used in many rites of passage. So a lot of times when girls have rites of passage, when they're going from let's say being, not able to be married when they have their first menses to being able to be married at weddings, when boys become acknowledged in their communities as men, those rites of passage are celebrated, and then someone who is masked come out because there's the invocation of this spirit. So it's rites of passage, harvest celebrations, and spiritual ceremonies. They're also used, excuse me, in times of war as an invocation of protection, for fertility. Masks are used for so many different reasons across these regions, and they can represent spirits, ancestors, animals, values, or even natural forces. So I know that some of us in North America say, we are very familiar with rain dances and things like that. Well, in a lot of different African cultures as well, especially because many of the seasons are just two. They're not necessarily all four seasons represented in all of the sub-Saharan African countries. Then half of the year is a time of drought. Well, not necessarily drought, but it's a time of no rain. And so if that time of no rain is prolonged, right, then countries can face drought. And so one of the things that they do to try and bring, to keep the country or that region from going into drought is they will invoke the spirit of rain, right, of the ancestors for rain, and they will do an homage so that rain would come. So it's a very common thing to do across cultures, and masks are used in that as well. Music, they're part of an immersive experience that includes music and dance and movement and costume. So a mask isn't just worn, it's part of a lived experience. And it's very common for you to take on a completely or an extension of a persona. So it can be a completely different persona, or it can be an extension of a persona. They're cultural gateways. They represent the identity of a community of people, and they represent long-lived traditions. So these are not things that people just bring up. They're deeply embedded in cultures across the continent. Annual festivals where young men dress up and paint their faces and perform dances to attract their partners, their beauty, for facial symmetry, whiteness sometimes of their eyes and teeth, to enhance the colors of the mask, to enhance the intensity. It can be a celebration of courtship, masculinity, and even endurance. For those of you who saw Woman King, Dahomey is in West Africa, and you saw some masked traditions actually in Woman King as well. Those of you who are familiar with Black Panther, right? All of that is a part of masked traditions. Okay. Um, that Sometimes, it's not a full face mask. Face paint is also a part of the masking process. So you can have masks that are wooden, for example, that you put over your face, or you can have facial paint. And that paint helps you, it's also a part of that invocational process. Okay. So we're going to take a look at some of the the traditions of mass culture. And I'm going to show you one video first for the Yoruba people in Nigeria on the power of transformation. I hope this works.
In a remote village, people of the Guaba ethnic group gather for a ceremony to bring good fortune. Coming out of the bush in ancestral spirit, the mask contains a snake spirit, bringer of fertility. A mask can weigh 25 pounds or more. An ancestral bird spirit, bringer of abundance. The beak hooked into the mouth represents secrets, the wisdom of the ancestors.
Donc à tout à l'heure. Et puis tu me dis pas, je t'invite mon frère.
The geometrical patterns on the masks are not just decoration. Initiates can read them as a symbolic language. The symbols convey moral lessons and the history of the group. The griots arrive. They are not only musicians, but carry
Let's see if we can get back into presentation mode. I think we can get there. Okay. Very good, very nice, very fine. So the basis of this is to let you know or remind you that masks have transformative power. They really can, in different cultures, go from, they have a spiritual transformation with a personal identity that leads to you having a cultural experience. And so what you all saw actually was the Bois mask dances of Burkina Faso. Also still in West Africa, not terribly far from Nigeria. But what you should have noticed in that is that they have large plank masks that have those really bold patterns that represent oftentimes animals or spirits or natural elements. This one specifically was for fertility. And those masks, right, as we noticed, can be over 20 pounds, just the masks alone, let alone the actual costume that they adorn, right? The actual costume that they adorn. It's used in initiation, agricultural festivals, and moral education. So you tell stories about people or about parables, right? You can talk in proverbs, or a lot of the masked people, individuals, they don't talk. They'll have other people like a griot saying the words for them or doing the invocation for them. Also, you can have full body costumes, like this one is a full body costume, because that means that the full adornment from head to toe is the enveloping of that person. It's a total transformation. So you can wear, when you are thinking of your personal identity, for these cultures, masks are superpowers, right? And so there is more, it's more to it than being magical or thinking like we sometimes think about, Marvel characters or something like that, superheroes. But when we think about the importance of masks and festivals specifically, so masks and festivals, you think of them in alignment with a celebration. You can have, these are spiritual bridges that create community bonds with rhythmic energy. Usually you don't have these types of festivals festivals without some sort of rhythm. Rhythm is integral because it's the heartbeat of a society or a community. If you're in a community, let's say, that has a griot, which is very common in West Africa, right? A griot is a storyteller. And we talked about that in the first Culture Club discussion. The repository of the history of a family or an entire community. They rely on rhythm, and they also rely, some of them, on the presence of these invocated spirits so that it can help tell the story and bridge those spiritual gaps to create community bonds using rhythmic energy. So I'm going to show you another video. This one comes from Chad. So if you know where West Africa is, Chad is actually in the central part of right underneath the Sahara. So it's not Central Africa. It is considered a part of West Africa, but it veers away just a bit and is right under the Sahara. What does Sahara mean from last time? Desert. So no point in saying Sahara Desert, right? Because Sahara means desert. So Chad is right underneath. It connects to the Sahara, and this is one of their rituals. Let me show you. All right. see if we can get back to here. So this was what you just saw was the Adobe culture, right, in chat. And let me make sure I get to the right. Okay. And what you just saw was the Gerewol Festival. And this is this idea of reimagined beauty. Okay. So if you notice, this particular masked culture was very different from the one that you saw in Burkina Faso, right? One, if anybody else is on, like what distinction did you find between these two different masked cultures? What distinction did you notice? You could have or should have noticed that the Gerewol Festival um, were had like no wooden masks on their faces. There are no wooden masks on their faces, and that was all paint. And the faces that were painted were the faces of men and not women. So what you saw here is a selection process. And so men actually beautify themselves by adorning this paint on their faces, and they have these very bright eyes and very white teeth, and they have to hold that position because the women, the virgins, the maidens are choosing them. If you notice in the video, you saw three virgins, three women, three maidens walk over, and they chose the best man, right? And so it ends up being this collective or collaborative celebration. And so you'd have a dance with facial expressions that showcase cultural values around courtship and community, that the community is involved in the courtship process. It's not one of those things where it's like, let me choose me a boyfriend or something like that. The whole community is involved in the courtship process because the courtship process will subsequently perpetuate the community. If you also took notice, the women in the community, as well as the men, before they put the masks on their faces, the paint on their faces, they have what we call markings, ethnic markings on their face. So sometimes what you'll see is on the face, you'll find, and Seal, I think, has it as well. As people go through rites of passage, then you'll see that they have cultural markings on their face of different patterns, and it could be on different parts of their bodies. Warriors or fighters, wrestlers tended to have a lot of markings on their stomachs, on their bellies. That's to show their veracity. And then these markings that come on the face will indicate the community or the ethnic group to which you belong. It could indicate if you were a married person or not. And so even in North Africa, you have the Amazigh, or the what people call quote unquote Berber. That's not a productive term, but it's what people know to call them. But those are the indigenous peoples of North Africa. The women have cultural markings that are tattooed on their faces. And those cultural markings indicate where they're from. It indicates whether they're married or not. And ultimately, it turned into, in North Africa and Morocco, those cultural markings were turned into alphabets and were turned into a written language around 2003, 2004. So it was absolutely amazing. And all of this comes from this tradition of marking that have these amazing invocations. Okay. And so then we have the Egungun Festival. And I'm sorry, this is the Egungun Festival with the Yoruba people in Nigeria. And so this festival is a festival about dancing with the ancestors. So we went from Burkina Faso to Chad. Now we're back deep in the heart of West Africa in Nigeria, and we're going to watch a little bit of this festival. And I want us to see if you can see any differences that are indicated from the first two festivals and then this one. Okay, let's see. Here we go.
Niger, please get set. The Bohemian boys on stage.
All right. So there's a lot more of this when you look into the festival or when you go to a festival. Basically, the short of this is in this particular festival, in the Egungun festival, then the key belief is that the Egungun is not a person in a costume. They become the spirit. So this one is about ancestor veneration. And so it's not ancestor worship. Let's get very clear. Okay. Ancestor worship is not really something that you need to, be concerned with in this particular culture. But veneration means to pay honor to your ancestors, to understand the hand that they play, in shaping your today and tomorrow. It celebrates and honors the ancestors. So what you saw was a mass dancer that represented the spirit of the dead. And then he was kind of cocooned underneath this blanket. And so you saw that he was in a full body costume with a bunch of layered fabrics initially, right before he got cocooned. And it represents a really powerful performance. Ultimately, the goal is to teach respect for elders, family, history, and spiritual guidance, and to provide spiritual guidance. And so this idea that exists really in a Akan culture, which is primarily in Ghana. You've heard of Sankofa, like the Sankofa bird, the reaching back to reclaim, the reclamation process, is so that that history is not forgotten, so that the history of a community is not forgotten, so that ancestors are always remembered and also honored. That's a part of the veneration and not necessarily of worship, right? And so I wanted to just make sure that that masks connect us all in a lot of different ways. So if you were, back to my initial question, if you were thinking about what kind of mask or superpower would represent your superpower, I encourage you to think about that. Like, what are elements of strength, of power, of grace, or whatever superpower characteristic you would like to have? I know I love to have characteristics, something that has characteristics for me of joy, peace, strength, fertility, grace, honor, those things. And then, how would you put them in masked form? And I encourage you to create your own. create your own mask, not necessarily out of wood and paint it, but just draw it. And what are those characteristics? What would those characteristics look like? You can make them vibrant. There are certain masks that are vibrant. You can keep them black and white. You can make them brown for being wooden. I just encourage you to do that. And when you do it, I want you to think about all of the history and all of the culture that is going into that creative expression for you. And you just hold on to it. Really, that's the most important part. Think of a quality that you want to celebrate when you're creating your own mask, or choose a symbol. If there's an animal, right? If I were to think about myself as being an animal, lots of us, especially those of us who like are prayer warriors, we're lions, right? So what would you want to be? Think of all of those things and come to a nice conclusion of what you want those things to look like for you. And then you can create your own mask. I hope today has been a lot of fun. Next week, we will be on and we will actually talk about traditional clothing and its meanings in different parts of the continent of Africa. So I want to thank you so much for joining me for Culture Club today. Again, my name is Robinette, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Take care, everybody.